When most people think of Boston, they picture cobblestone streets, revolutionary history, and the iconic spires of Harvard University rising above the Charles River. But hidden within the hallowed halls of America's oldest and most prestigious academic institutions lies a story that few have ever told. A story about the elite Filipino families who came to these ivy-covered campuses with nothing but ambition, absorbed the wisdom of the world's finest business minds, and returned home to build some of the largest fortunes in Southeast Asian history. This isn't a story about trust fund kids coasting on inherited wealth. This is a story about transformation, about how a single semester in a Cambridge classroom could plant the seeds of a billion-dollar empire half a world away, about how the lessons learned in Harvard's legendary case study halls would later reshape the economies of entire nations. The Philippines today boasts some of the most remarkable business dynasties in Asia, families whose combined wealth exceeds the GDP of small countries, conglomerates that control everything from the food you eat to the malls you shop in, from the banks that hold your money to the airlines that carry you across the archipelago. And remarkably, when you trace the education of these titans back to its source, you find a pattern that emerges again and again. Boston, Harvard, the crucible where ordinary Filipino students were forged into extraordinary business leaders. We're counting down the 10 wealthiest Filipino families and individuals with profound Boston connections. These aren't casual visitors who passed through Logan Airport. These are individuals who lived in the dorms, walked the frozen streets, survived the brutal winters, and emerged with credentials that would open every door back home. Their stories span generations. A father who studied architecture in the 1950s, whose son would later return to earn both an undergraduate and graduate degree from the same institution. A self-made billionaire who, at the height of his success, still felt compelled to return to Harvard's advanced management program to sharpen his skills further. The fortunes we're about to explore are staggering. Combined, these families control wealth exceeding $100 billion. They employ hundreds of thousands of people. Their decisions literally move markets. And it all connects back to one unlikely place: a small city in Massachusetts where Filipino students have been quietly training to become Asia's most powerful business leaders for over half a century. Stick around until the end, because the family at number one didn't just attend Harvard. They've become so intertwined with the institution that their name now adorns its buildings and their legacy shapes its future. When you trace the paths of the Philippines' most powerful business dynasties, an unexpected pattern emerges. Again and again, the architects of billion-dollar empires share a common chapter in their stories. A chapter written in the shadow of ivy-covered walls, along the frozen banks of the Charles River, in a city that has quietly shaped the future of Filipino commerce for over half a century. Boston. We begin our countdown with a name that might not immediately ring bells, but whose story represents the quiet influence of Massachusetts education on Filipino business. Mariano Tan Jr. built his fortune in the pharmaceutical and manufacturing sectors, amassing wealth estimated at $370 million. But before he became a titan of Philippine industry, he was a young man seeking knowledge far from home. In 1983, Tan graduated from Lafayette College with a degree in economics and business. But he wasn't finished. 3 years later, in 1986, he completed his Master of Science in Management from Holt International Business School in Massachusetts. At the time, the program was still building its reputation, but Tan recognized something that would serve him well throughout his career. The best education isn't always found in the most famous institutions. Sometimes it's found wherever rigorous thinking and global perspective converge. That Massachusetts experience gave Tan something invaluable: exposure to international business practices, a network of global contacts, and the analytical frameworks that would later guide his decisions in the competitive Philippine market. He returned home armed with more than a degree. He carried with him a methodology for success that transcended borders. Mariano Tan Jr. represents a generation of Filipino businessmen who understood that competing on the world stage required world-class preparation. His story reminds us that Boston's influence on Filipino wealth extends beyond Harvard Yard, reaching into every institution where determined Filipinos sought excellence. But as we move up our list, the connections to Boston grow deeper, the fortunes grow larger, and the stories grow more remarkable. At number 9, we encounter a name that resonates through every sector of the Philippine economy. The Abatiz family controls a sprawling empire worth an estimated $2.2 billion, with interests spanning power generation, banking, food production, and shipping. And at the heart of their fourth generation stands Ana Maria Abatiz Delgado, a woman who chose Boston College to begin her journey toward leading one of the nation's most venerable business dynasties. The Abatiz story begins in the late 1800s, when Paulino Abatiz established a simple trading business in Cebu. From those humble origins, the family built Abatiz Equity Ventures into one of the Philippines' most diversified conglomerates. Today, their portfolio includes Abatiz Power, Union Bank, Pilmico Foods, and critical infrastructure projects, including the Mactan Cebu International Airport. It's nearly impossible to live in the Philippines without touching an Abatiz business. Ana Maria didn't take the obvious path. While many heirs pursue business degrees from the start, she followed her passion to Boston College, where she earned a bachelor's degree in art history. It might seem an unusual choice for someone destined to lead a financial empire, but Anna understood something profound. Business is about more than spreadsheets and profit margins. It's about vision, creativity, and understanding the human element behind every transaction. That artistic perspective would later prove invaluable. After Boston, she pursued an MBA from New York University's Stern School of Business, combining creative thinking with rigorous financial training. When she joined Union Bank as a management trainee in 2003, few could have predicted how high she would rise. But rise she did, becoming a driving force behind the bank's legendary digital transformation. Her leadership pushed Union Bank to the forefront of Filipino fintech. Under her guidance, the institution launched the country's first fully digital bank branch, pioneering innovations that redefined how Filipinos interact with their money. Her efforts earned her appointment after appointment until January 2025 brought the ultimate recognition. Ana Maria Aboitiz Delgado officially became president and CEO of Union Bank, a historic achievement that placed a fourth-generation heir at the helm of one of the family's most valuable assets. She describes her life as a constant balancing act, juggling the demands of leading a major financial institution with the expectations of stewarding a century-old family legacy. But perhaps that balance is exactly what her Boston education prepared her for. Art history taught her to see patterns others miss, to appreciate the long arc of history, and to understand that the most enduring creations blend technical excellence with human meaning. Ana Maria Aboitiz Delgado represents the new face of Filipino dynastic wealth. Educated globally, rooted locally, and determined to prove that heritage and innovation can coexist. But if her story shows what Boston education can do for inherited wealth, our next entry demonstrates what it can do for self-made ambition. Breaking into the 8th spot is a man who transformed a 2-branch ice cream parlor into an empire that defeated McDonald's on its home turf. Tony Tan Caktiong, founder and chairman of Jollibee Foods Corporation, commands a fortune of $2.9 billion and controls the largest fast food chain in the Philippines. His journey from dishwasher to billionaire is legendary, but fewer people know about his connection to Boston. Born in 1953 in Davao to Chinese immigrant parents from Fujian province, Tony learned the restaurant business from the ground up. His father worked as a cook in a Buddhist temple before opening a small restaurant where young Tony cleared tables and washed dishes. Those early lessons in hard work and customer service would stay with him forever. He earned his degree in chemical engineering from the University of Santo Tomas in 1975. The same year, he opened his first ice cream parlor. 3 years later, that parlor became Jollibee. When McDonald's entered the Philippines, everyone expected the American giant to dominate. Tony saw it differently. Instead of copying the competition, he doubled down on Filipino flavors. Sweet-style spaghetti with hot dogs and cheese, chicken joy, crispy and perfectly seasoned to local tastes. Rice meals that acknowledged how Filipinos actually eat. The strategy worked spectacularly, but Tony never stopped learning. Even at the height of his success, he sought additional training, earning management certifications from both Harvard University and Harvard Business School. That willingness to remain a student, even as a billionaire, exemplifies his philosophy. Dreams are free, he often says. Why limit what you're aspiring for? But dreaming is not enough. One needs to put in enough energy and input. Today, Jollibee Foods Corporation operates over 6,300 stores worldwide. The smiling red bee has become a symbol of Filipino pride, proof that local champions can triumph over global giants. And behind that triumph stands a man who understood that Boston's classrooms held lessons worth learning at any age, at any level of success. As we cross into the upper half of our countdown, the fortunes grow staggering, and the Boston connections deepen from brief executive programs into transformative educational experiences. These are no longer stories of certifications and short courses. These are stories of men who traveled to Cambridge at pivotal moments in their lives and emerged fundamentally changed. Men whose Harvard experiences didn't just polish existing skills, but rewired how they thought about business, competition, and legacy. At number 7 stands a titan whose name is synonymous with Filipino entrepreneurship itself. John Gokongwei Jr. built a business empire spanning airlines, telecommunications, retail, food, and petrochemicals. At the time of his death in November 2019, his fortune exceeded $5.4 billion, and his JG Summit holdings controlled combined market capitalization exceeding $20 billion. But perhaps the most remarkable chapter of his remarkable life came in 1972, when the already successful businessman made a decision that surprised many. He enrolled in Harvard Business School's 14-week advanced management program. The Gokongwei story begins in tragedy. Born in 1926 to a wealthy Cebu family with ancestral ties to China's Fujian province, young John enjoyed a privileged childhood. His father ran multiple movie theaters. Private Chinese lessons and violin rehearsals filled his days. Then, in 1939, his father died of typhoid. John was 13 years old. The family fortune evaporated overnight. What happened next would become the stuff of Philippine business legend. The teenage Gokongwei began peddling items along the streets of Cebu from his bicycle. He sold roasted peanuts to schoolmates, hawked soap and candles to anyone who would buy. Between ages 17 and 19, during the chaos of World War II, he became a merchant trader, using a wooden boat to transport goods from Cebu to Lucena, then by truck to Manila. While other boys his age dreamed of peacetime, John Gokongwei dreamed of building something that could never be taken away. After the war, he founded Amasia Trading, importing flour, onions, fruits, and used clothing from the United States. When his siblings returned from China, they joined the business, expanding into cigarettes and whiskey. But Gokongwei recognized a fundamental truth that would guide his career. Trading would always mean low margins and dependence on government policies. manufacturing was the path to real wealth. In 1957, with a 500,000 peso loan from China Bank chairman Albino Sikip, he established Universal Corn Products. That corn milling plant would evolve into Universal Robina Corporation, today one of the largest food and beverage companies in Southeast Asia. Success followed success. Robinson's department stores, Cebu Pacific Airlines, which democratized air travel for ordinary Filipinos. Digital Telecommunications Philippines. The empire grew relentlessly. Yet even at the height of his success, Gokongwei felt something was missing. In 1977, he earned his MBA from De La Salle University, proving that learning had no age limit. He was 51 years old, but he wasn't finished. 5 years later, he traveled to Boston for Harvard's Advanced Management program. When I got my diploma, it was one of the proudest moments of my life, Gokongwei later recalled. Then I went to Harvard in 1972 for 14 weeks to take the Advanced Management program. He went not because he needed credentials, but because he wanted exposure to important businessmen and people. He wanted to see how the world's best companies operated, to absorb frameworks he could adapt for Philippine conditions. That intellectual humility defined his leadership style. Through the years, I've stayed an entrepreneur, working hard and always learning from the school of life, he said at age 92. Today, I'm 92 years old. I still know what has been going on in my company, and I study and learn and always read books. On his 80th birthday, Gokongwei announced he was donating 20 billion pesos, half his personal fortune, to the Gokongwei Brothers Foundation. Life has been good to me, he explained, and I want to give back the blessings I have received. He reminded his audience to love your country, never stop caring, and always look back and be grateful to where you came from. John Gokongwei Jr. passed away on November 9, 2019. His wife, Elizabeth, followed exactly 1 week later, but his legacy endures in every Cebu Pacific flight that carries Filipinos home, every Universal Robina product on supermarket shelves, every lesson he taught about resilience, reinvention, and the value of remaining a student no matter how much success you achieve. His 14 weeks in Boston represented just a fraction of his 93 years, but they exemplified the philosophy that made him great. Never stop learning. Never believe you've arrived. If Gokongwei's Harvard experience came at the peak of his career, our next entry represents something different entirely. At number 6, we meet a man who established a family tradition that would transform Harvard into a multi-generational Filipino institution. Jaime Zobel de Ayala Sr. didn't just attend Harvard. He created a dynasty that would send generation after generation to those same ivy-covered halls. Born on July 18, 1934, Jaime Zobel entered a world of extraordinary privilege and equally extraordinary responsibility. The Zobel de Ayala family had been building the Philippines for over a century. Ayala y Compañía, established in 1876, traced its origins to Casa Roxas, a trading house founded in 1834. By the time young Jaime came of age, he was inheriting not just wealth, but a legacy of nation-building that stretched back to the Spanish colonial era. After early education in the Philippines, Zobel made a choice that would echo through generations. He enrolled at Harvard University, earning his bachelor's degree in architectural sciences in 1957. He was among the first prominent Filipinos to complete an undergraduate degree at Harvard, establishing a beachhead that his family would later expand into a fortress. But one Harvard degree wasn't enough. In 1963, Zobel returned to Boston for the Advanced Management program conducted by Harvard Business School. This wasn't a man seeking credentials. This was a leader preparing himself for responsibilities that would extend far beyond corporate boardrooms. Those responsibilities came calling in 1984, when Zobel succeeded his cousin Enrique as chairman and president of Ayala Corporation. He steered the company through the turbulent final years of the Marcos dictatorship, actively participating in the People Power Revolution that overthrew the regime in 1986. In 1988, he spun off Ayala Land, creating one of the largest real estate developers in Southeast Asia. Throughout it all, Jaime Zobel maintained his Harvard connection, returning for advisory roles and ensuring his children understood the value of Boston education. What he started as a young architecture student in 1957 would become something far greater, a template for Filipino excellence that his son would perfect. We have now entered rarefied air. The stories that remain are not merely tales of wealth and education. They are stories of individuals who fundamentally altered industries, who created technologies that changed how humanity lives, and whose fortunes dwarf anything we have encountered thus far. As we approach the summit of our countdown, prepare yourself for figures whose influence extends far beyond Philippine shores, whose legacies will echo through generations yet unborn. At number 5 stands a man whose story defies every expectation, every stereotype, every limitation that circumstance tried to impose upon him. Diosdado Banatao, known to the world as Dado, was born in 1946 in Iguig, a small town in Cagayan Province at the northern tip of the Philippines. His childhood home had no electricity. His family farmed for survival. Young Dado walked to school barefoot, his only advantages being an insatiable curiosity and parents who understood that education could transform destiny. That barefoot boy would grow up to become one of Silicon Valley's most influential technologists, a billionaire whose inventions sit inside virtually every computer on Earth. At the time of his death on December the 25th, 2025, his fortune was estimated at $5 billion. But the money tells only a fraction of the story. Banato earned his electrical engineering degree from Mapua Institute of Technology in Manila, graduating in 1968. He worked briefly as a pilot for Philippine Airlines before recognizing that his future lay not in the cockpit but in the laboratory. He immigrated to the United States, earning his master's degree in electrical engineering from Stanford University in 1972. From there, he joined the great adventure that was early Silicon Valley. At Commodore International, Banatao designed some of the first single-chip microprocessors. But his most revolutionary contributions came at Chips and Technologies, where in 1984 he created something that would change computing forever: the chipset. Before Banatao's innovation, computer motherboards required dozens of separate chips to function. His invention consolidated those functions into a single integrated package, making personal computers dramatically cheaper, more reliable, and accessible to ordinary consumers. Without Dado Banatao, the PC revolution might have remained a luxury for corporations and enthusiasts, rather than becoming the democratizing force that transformed modern life. He wasn't finished. Later, Banatao developed the first graphics accelerator chip, the ancestor of every GPU that today powers video games, artificial intelligence, and cryptocurrency mining. He also created a local bus concept for microprocessors, innovations so fundamental that they became invisible, woven into the fabric of technology itself. In 1998, Banatao transitioned from inventor to investor, co-founding Tallwood Venture Capital. He backed more than 135 startup companies across sectors including enterprise, communications, and green technology. His eye for transformative ideas proved as sharp in the boardroom as it had been in the laboratory. But what set Banatao apart from other Silicon Valley billionaires was his determination to lift the Philippines alongside his own success. In 2000, he established the Philippine Development Foundation, known as PhilDev, dedicated to improving science, technology, and mathematics education throughout the country. He believed that what worked for him, education as the pathway from poverty to prosperity, could work for millions of his countrymen. Every Filipino student who receives a PhilDev scholarship, every rural school that gains access to technology education, every young engineer who dreams of following in Banatao's footsteps, carries forward the legacy of that barefoot boy from Cagayan. Dado Banatao proved that Filipino ingenuity could compete at the highest levels of global technology. His $5 billion fortune was merely the scoreboard. His true victory was showing an entire nation what was possible. While Banatao built his empire in Silicon Valley, our next entry represents something different entirely. At number 4, we encounter not a single visionary, but a collective force that dominates Philippine commerce more completely than any other family. The Sy siblings, children of the legendary Henry Sy Sr., control combined fortunes exceeding $11.8 billion, making them the wealthiest family in the Philippines. And their connection to Boston, while less publicized than others on our list, runs through the executive education programs that help govern their sprawling empire. Henry Sy Sr. arrived in the Philippines from China's Fujian province in 1936. He was 12 years old, spoke no local languages, and possessed nothing but determination. He worked in his father's small variety store in Manila, learning retail from the ground up. The Japanese occupation during World War II destroyed everything the family had built. Sy started over, selling imported American shoes from a small store in Carriedo. From that modest beginning grew SM Investments Corporation, today the largest conglomerate in the Philippines. When Henry Sy passed away in January 2019 at age 94, he left behind more than 60 shopping malls, over 2,000 convenience stores, one of the largest banks in the country, and a real estate portfolio worth billions. But his greatest legacy was the family he raised to continue his vision. His 6 children now oversee different aspects of the empire. Teresita Sicoson serves as vice chairperson of SM Investments, the steady hand guiding corporate strategy. Henry Sy Jr. chairs the executive committee, maintaining the family's retail dominance. Hans Sy leads SM Prime Holdings, the property development arm responsible for those gleaming malls that anchor cities across the archipelago. Herbert Sy oversees SM Supermalls, ensuring that the shopping experience remains central to Filipino family life. Harley Sy focuses on retail expansion, while Elizabeth Sy concentrates on the banking operations that provide the financial backbone for SM's ambitions. Together, the 6 siblings appear consistently on Forbes Philippines' 50 richest list, their combined wealth representing the largest family fortune in the nation. Their shopping malls serve as community centers where Filipinos gather not just to shop, but to worship, to dine, to escape the tropical heat, to celebrate life's milestones. In a very real sense, the Sy family has shaped how modern Filipinos experience public space itself. The family maintains connections to prestigious business education institutions, including Harvard's executive programs that have helped professionalize their management of one of Asia's largest retail empires. From a 12-year-old immigrant with empty pockets to a dynasty worth nearly $12 billion in 3 generations, the Sy family story represents the Philippine dream in its most spectacular form. But as we prepare to enter the final 3 entries, remember this: fortune alone does not determine ranking on our list. We are measuring something more specific: the depth and significance of Boston connections that shaped Filipino wealth. And in our top 3, those connections reach extraordinary heights. We stand now at the threshold of our final 3 entries. These are not merely wealthy individuals with incidental Boston connections. These are figures for whom Harvard is woven into the very fabric of their identity. whose Cambridge experiences didn't supplement their success but fundamentally shaped it. The fortunes here are measured in billions. The legacies span centuries, and the Boston connections run deeper than anywhere else on our list. At number 3, we meet the man who transformed the Ayala vision into physical reality across the Philippine landscape. Fernando Zobel de Ayala serves as President and Chief Operating Officer of Ayala Corporation and Chairman of Ayala Land, the largest real estate developer in the Philippines. His personal fortune, combined with his family's holdings, places him among the wealthiest individuals in Southeast Asia. But it was in Boston where Fernando first learned to see the world through the eyes of a builder. Fernando graduated from Harvard College in 1979, earning his bachelor's degree 2 years before his older brother would complete the same journey. Where others might have viewed Harvard as merely a prestigious credential, Fernando absorbed something deeper. He studied how cities function, how communities form around shared spaces, how thoughtful development can elevate human life rather than merely housing it. That education manifested in Ayala Land's approach to real estate. Under Fernando's leadership, the company didn't simply construct buildings. It created integrated communities where Filipinos could live, work, worship, and raise families within carefully planned environments. Makati's gleaming business district, Bonifacio Global City's transformation from military base to urban showcase, Nuvali's pioneering sustainable development south of Manila. Each project reflected principles Fernando first encountered in Harvard's classrooms. But Fernando's influence extends beyond bricks and mortar. He serves on numerous corporate boards, guiding strategy across the Ayala portfolio. He has championed sustainability initiatives that position Ayala as a leader in responsible development. And he has worked alongside his brother to ensure that the family's 7th generation of leadership honors the legacy of those who came before while preparing for challenges yet to emerge. Fernando Zobel de Ayala represents the quiet power of Harvard education applied to nation building. Every Filipino who walks through an Ayala mall, lives in an Ayala development, or works in an Ayala-built office tower experiences the fruits of what began in Cambridge over 4 decades ago. At number 2, we return to complete the story we began earlier. Jaime Zobel de Ayala Sr. didn't merely attend Harvard. He transformed that experience into a family tradition that would span generations and reshape how the Philippine elite understood the value of global education. After earning his architectural sciences degree in 1957 and completing the advanced management program in 1963, Jaime Sr. rose steadily through Ayala's ranks. When he assumed the chairmanship in 1984, the Philippines stood at a crossroads. The Marcos dictatorship was crumbling. Economic uncertainty gripped the nation. Lesser leaders might have retreated into conservative strategies, protecting existing wealth rather than risking it on national transformation. Jaime Zobel chose differently. He became an active participant in the People Power Revolution of 1986, lending the Ayala family's considerable prestige and resources to the cause of democratic restoration. When Ferdinand Marcos fled and Corazon Aquino assumed the presidency, Ayala Corporation stood ready to help rebuild. The following decades saw expansion that would have seemed impossible during the dictatorship's final years. Globe Telecom brought communications to millions of Filipinos. Bank of the Philippine Islands strengthened its position as one of the nation's premier financial institutions. Ayala Land developed properties that redefined Philippine urban living. Through it all, Jaime Sr. maintained his Harvard connections, returning for advisory roles and ensuring that Boston remained central to the family's educational philosophy. His influence extended beyond commerce into philanthropy and the arts. He supported cultural institutions, educational foundations, and initiatives that enriched Filipino life in ways no balance sheet could capture. When he stepped back from daily operations, passing leadership to the next generation, He had transformed Ayala from a venerable Philippine institution into a regional powerhouse with global aspirations. And now we arrive at the summit of our countdown, the individual whose Boston connection is not merely deep, but historic. The Filipino whose Harvard achievements set precedents that still stand today. Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala, Chairman and Chief Executive Officer of Ayala Corporation, commands a family fortune of $3.4 billion. But reducing his story to money misses what makes him extraordinary. This is the man who became the first Filipino ever to receive the Harvard Business School Alumni Achievement Award, the school's highest honor for graduates who have contributed significantly to their communities and the world. Born on March 16, 1959, Jaime Augusto grew up understanding that privilege carries responsibility. He enrolled at Harvard College, graduating cum laude with a bachelor's degree in economics in 1981. But he wasn't finished with Cambridge. He returned to earn his MBA from Harvard Business School in 1987, cementing a connection that would define his career. What Jaime Augusto did with that education transformed Philippine business. Under his leadership, Ayala Corporation evolved from a traditional conglomerate into an innovation-driven enterprise spanning real estate, banking, telecommunications, water infrastructure, power generation, and healthcare. He championed digital transformation before it became a corporate buzzword. He pushed sustainability initiatives that positioned Ayala as a regional leader in responsible capitalism. Then came 2007. Harvard Business School announced that Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala would receive the Alumni Achievement Award. No Filipino had ever received this recognition. The honor placed him alongside global titans of industry and finance, acknowledging not just his business success, but his commitment to improving lives beyond the boardroom. He later served as chairman of the Harvard Business School Asia Pacific Advisory Board, helping shape how the institution engages with the region that will define the 21st century economy. Every Filipino who now studies at Harvard, every Philippine executive who participates in Harvard programs, walks a path that Jaime Augusto helped establish. Today, from his position atop a century-old family enterprise, Jaime Augusto Zobel de Ayala embodies what Boston education can mean for Filipino leadership. He proves that excellence knows no geographic boundaries, that a family rooted in Philippine soil can produce leaders who stand among the world's finest. The richest Filipino family in Boston isn't merely rich, they are historic, and their story is still being written. So after this extensive journey through the intersection of Filipino ambition and Boston education, what have we really discovered? That the Charles River and the Pasig River are connected by something far more powerful than geography. They're connected by knowledge, by aspiration, and by a tradition of excellence that spans generations. The families we've explored today represent a combined fortune exceeding $100 billion. They employ hundreds of thousands of workers. Their decisions affect the daily lives of over 100 million Filipinos. And remarkably, so many of them trace transformative moments in their lives back to the same small city in Massachusetts. From Mariano Tan Jr.'s management studies at Hult to Ana Maria Aboitiz Delgado's art history degree at Boston College. From Tony Tan Cactiong's executive certifications that helped him build a fast food empire that defeated McDonald's, to John Gokongwei's 14-week program that he called one of the proudest moments of his life. From the late Dado Banatao, who proved a barefoot boy from the provinces could revolutionize global computing, to the mighty Sai siblings who control the largest fortune in the nation. And at the pinnacle, we find the Zobel de Ayala dynasty, a family so intertwined with Harvard that their commitment spans 3 generations. Father Jaime Sr., who earned his architecture degree in 1957. Son Jaime Augusto, who completed both undergraduate and graduate degrees and became the first Filipino ever to receive Harvard Business School's highest honor. A family that doesn't just send their children to Harvard. They shape the institution itself through advisory boards and continuing engagement. What's the lesson here? Perhaps it's that education truly is the great equalizer. That a young person from Manila, from Cebu, from Davao, can sit in the same classrooms as students from the wealthiest families in America and Europe, and emerge not just equal, but sometimes superior. That the principles of sound business management, strategic thinking, and ethical leadership transcend borders and cultures. These Filipino families didn't just attend Boston's finest institutions. They absorbed their teachings, returned home, and built empires that have transformed a nation. They've proven that the distance between Harvard Yard and the Philippine archipelago is measured not in miles, but in determination. So, after this exploration of the richest Filipino families in Boston, what did you think of our list? Were you surprised by who ultimately claimed the top spot? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this deep dive into the intersection of Filipino wealth and Boston education, don't forget to subscribe for more stories about the extraordinary people shaping our world.